Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Speak More Fluently. You know that feeling, right? Like when you're trying to speak English and you kind of freeze up,
Yeah.
even though you know what you want to say.
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling.
It's like your brain and your mouth just aren't on speaking terms at that moment.
It's like there's this invisible wall that just pops up.
Exactly. And today we're going to really dig into why that happens. And more importantly, we're going to unpack some really practical strategies to help you break through that barrier and just start speaking more freely.
I think a lot of it has to do with fear, you know?
Oh, totally.
Like, it's almost as if you're suddenly on stage with a spotlight on you and everyone's just waiting for you to mess up.
It's so true. It's like all eyes are on you and you feel this pressure to perform perfectly. And if you make even the smallest mistake,
Exactly.
it's like the world's going to end.
And that fear of judgment, of not sounding good enough, it's a huge part of why so many people hesitate to speak.
Yeah, it's almost like we're afraid of our own English. Like it's this wild animal we can't quite control.
And you know what's interesting is that this feeling, this fear, it's incredibly common.
Oh, yeah.
Almost everyone who learns a new language experiences it at some point.
I think that's actually really reassuring to know you're not alone in this.
Exactly. It's
But-
totally normal.
But even though it's normal, it doesn't mean we should just accept it, right? Because every time we let that hesitation win, we're missing out on a chance to actually practice and improve.
You're absolutely right. It's like we're stuck in this loop,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
We're afraid to speak because we don't feel confident, and we don't feel confident because we're not speaking enough.
It's like a catch-22.
Exactly.
So how do we break out of that cycle?
Well, I think the first step is to change our mindset about mistakes.
Oh, yeah. I'm all for that.
We tend to see mistakes as these huge failures, these signs that we're just not good at English.
Yeah, like we should just give up.
But actually, mistakes are incredibly valuable. They're like little signposts pointing us in the right direction.
It's like the language is giving us feedback, saying, hey, pay attention to this. You can improve here.
And let's be honest, even native English speakers make mistakes all the time, right? We stumble over words, we forget grammar rules. It happens to everyone.
So true. And the world doesn't end when we mess up a sentence.
Exactly. The point of speaking is to communicate, to share ideas and connect with others, and we can do that even if our English isn't perfect.
I think that's a really important point to remember. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's to be effective.
Right. And once we shift our focus from perfection to communication, we can start to let go of some of that fear and actually enjoy the process of learning.
All right, so we've talked about the fear and the mindset shift, but what are some practical things people can do to build their confidence and start speaking more fluently?
Well, one of the most important things, and this might sound obvious, is to practice regularly.
Makes sense. The more you do something, the easier it gets right.
Exactly. It's like any skill, the more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
And practice doesn't have to mean like giving a presentation or having a formal conversation.
Oh, definitely not. It can be as simple as talking to yourself in English while you're cooking or driving, or even just thinking in English throughout the day.
I love that idea, just incorporating it into your daily life.
And there are so many other ways to practice too, like finding a language exchange partner online or joining a conversation group in your community.
Those are great ideas, and they give you the opportunity to actually interact with other people, which is so important.
And another thing that can be really helpful is to set realistic goals.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, sometimes people get discouraged because they're aiming for this huge goal of fluency, and it feels overwhelming.
Yeah, it's like trying to climb a mountain in one go.
Exactly. So instead of focusing on the big picture, break it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
So maybe this week your goal is to just introduce yourself to one new person in English, or order your coffee in English at your favorite cafe.
Those are great examples. And every time you achieve a small goal, it gives you a little boost of confidence and motivation to keep going.
I love that idea. It's like building momentum.
And you know what else can be helpful in those moments? When you feel that hesitation creeping in.
Tell me.
Mindfulness techniques.
Oh, interesting.
How does that work?
Well, just taking a few deep breaths before you speak can help to calm your nerves and clear your mind.
It's like hitting the pause button for a second.
Exactly. And it gives you a chance to focus on what you want to say rather than getting caught up in those anxious thoughts.
I can definitely see how that would be helpful. And it's not just what we say that matters, right? Our body language also plays a big role.
Absolutely. Nonverbal communication is huge things, like making eye contact, smiling, and using hand gestures can make a big difference in how confident you appear and how well you connect with others.
It's like our body language is speaking even when our words aren't.
Exactly. And sometimes even just faking it till you make it. Like standing up straight and making eye contact can actually make you feel more confident. That's a good point. It's like tricking your brain into feeling more comfortable.
And speaking of our brains, we can't forget about the power of self-talk.
Oh, yeah, that inner voice can be pretty brutal sometimes.
It can be. And the more we focus on negative thoughts like, "Oh, I'm going to mess up," or "people are going to judge me," the more anxious we become.
So how do we combat that negative self-talk?
By consciously replacing those negative thoughts with positive affirmations like, "I can do this," or "I'm making progress every day."
It's like retraining our brains to be more supportive and encouraging.
Exactly. And the more we practice positive self-talk, the more confident we'll feel and the more likely we are to actually speak up.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in terms of mindset and general strategies, but let's get even more specific. What are some really concrete techniques that people can use to overcome speaking hesitation in the moment?
But one technique that can be really helpful is to record yourself speaking English.
Oh, I can see how that might be a bit intimidating.
It can be, but it's also incredibly insightful when you listen back to yourself. You can identify areas where you want to improve your pronunciation, your grammar, your vocabulary.
And it also allows you to track your progress over time, which can be really motivating.
Exactly. You can hear yourself getting better, and that could be a huge confidence boost.
I like that it's tangible proof that you're improving.
Another really practical technique is role playing.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, think about common situations where you might need to use English, like ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, or making small talk with a colleague.
And then you practice those scenarios beforehand.
Exactly. You can rehearse what you might say and how you might respond to different questions or prompts.
That takes away some of the uncertainty and anxiety of the unknown.
It does, and allows you to practice your speaking skills in a safe and controlled environment.
So when you're actually in that real-life situation, you're more prepared and less likely to freeze up.
And another great way to practice speaking is to join a conversation group or a language learning community.
There's something really powerful about connecting with other people who are going through the same journey.
It is, you can share tips and strategies, support each other, and practice speaking in a non-judgmental environment.
And you can learn from each other's mistakes and successes.
Exactly. And there's also a technique called shadowing that can be really effective.
Shadowing, that sounds intriguing. What is that?
Well, it involves finding a recording of a native English speaker, like a podcast, a TED Talk, or even a scene from a movie.
And then what?
And then you listen to the recording and try to repeat what they're saying as closely as possible, matching their pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm.
So you're like their shadow.
Exactly. It might feel a bit silly at first, but it's a really powerful way to train your ear and your mouth to produce more natural-sounding English.
I can see how that would help you to internalize those subtle nuances of the language.
And one final tip that can make a big difference is to focus on using simple language.
That might seem counterintuitive, but I think I get what you mean.
A lot of people feel like they need to use big words and complex grammar to sound fluent.
Yeah, like they're trying to impress people.
But often the most effective communication happens when we use clear and simple language that everyone can understand.
And it's also less likely to trip you up when you're speaking.
Exactly. So don't be afraid to keep it simple, especially when you're starting out.
So it sounds like consistency is key, right? The more we practice in different ways, the more fluent and confident we'll become.
Absolutely. Every time you speak English, whether it's for 5 minutes or an hour, you're training your brain to process and produce the language more efficiently.
It's like exercising a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
And it's not just about active speaking. Either immersing yourself in English through music, movies, TV shows, podcasts, and books can also make a big difference.
It's like surrounding yourself with the language.
Exactly. The more exposure you have to authentic English, the more familiar it will become and the easier it will be to understand and speak.
And it can also be a fun way to learn about different cultures and perspectives.
Absolutely. And speaking of challenges, let's talk a bit more about the fear of making mistakes.
I think that's something that holds a lot of people back.
It does. It's one of the biggest obstacles to fluency, but the good news is that we can overcome it.
So how do we do that?
So the first step is to accept that mistakes are a natural part of the learning process.
Everyone makes mistakes, right? It's how we learn and grow.
Exactly. And when we see mistakes as opportunities for learning rather than failures, we take away some of their power.
I like that it's a shift in perspective.
And another helpful tip is to ask for feedback from others.
Like from teachers, friends, or language exchange partners.
Exactly. Having someone point out areas where you can improve can be really valuable.
And remember, everyone who speaks English fluently today was once a beginner who made countless mistakes.
That's so true. It's all part of the journey.
Now, let's move beyond the practice environment and talk about how to apply these skills in real-life situations.
Because ultimately the goal is to be able to communicate effectively in the real world, right?
Exactly. So how do we bridge that gap between practice and real-life application?
Well, one great way is to attend language exchange meetups or other events where you can interact with native English speakers.
It's a chance to practice your skills in a relaxed and informal setting.
And you can learn about different cultures and make new friends at the same time.
And it's not just about dedicated language events, right? You can also incorporate English into your everyday life.
Absolutely. Like trying out a recipe from an English language cookbook or watching a movie in English with subtitles.
Those are great examples. And if you have the opportunity, traveling to an English-speaking country can be an incredibly immersive experience.
It's like throwing yourself into the deep end, but in a good way.
You're forced to use English all the time, which can really accelerate your learning.
And you get to experience the culture firsthand, which can deepen your understanding of the language.
Now, beyond the core strategies we've discussed, what are some other, perhaps less obvious techniques that people can use to enhance their speaking skills?
Well, one thing that can be really helpful is to join online forums or communities that are related to your interests.
So if you're into photography, for example, you could join an online photography forum where people discuss their work and share tips.
Exactly. It's a great way to practice reading and writing in English and to learn new vocabulary related to your hobbies.
And it can also help you to connect with people from different cultures who share your interests.
And another great resource is language learning apps.
There are so many apps out there these days, it can be hard to choose.
It can, but many of them offer really helpful features like interactive exercises, pronunciation practice, and even simulated conversations.
They can be a great way to supplement your learning and practice on the go.
And one technique that might sound a bit strange, but can actually be quite effective, is to practice speaking in front of a mirror.
Oh, I've heard of that. What's the idea behind it?
Well, it allows you to see yourself as others see you, and to pay attention to your facial expressions, your body language, and your mouth movements.
It's like becoming more aware of how you present yourself when you speak.
Exactly. And it can help you to identify any habits or mannerisms that you might want to adjust.
It's like having your own personal speech coach.
And another thing that can be really helpful is to find a speaking buddy.
Someone who's also learning English.
Exactly. You can practice together, support each other, and hold each other accountable.
It's like having a workout buddy for your language skills.
And finally, one of the most important things is to celebrate your progress along the way.
I love that idea. It's so easy to get caught up in what we're not doing yet that we forget to acknowledge how far we've come.
It's so true. So make sure you take the time to celebrate every milestone, no matter how small.
Whether it's finally mastering a tricky grammar point or having a successful conversation with a native speaker.
Those are all reasons to celebrate and to give yourself credit for your hard work.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's clear that overcoming speaking hesitation in English is a journey.
It's not something that happens overnight.
It takes time, effort, and a willingness to embrace the challenges along the way.
But the rewards are so worth it.
Being able to communicate confidently in English opens up the whole world of opportunities.
And it allows you to connect with people from all over the world, share your ideas and experiences, and truly express yourself.
So if you're feeling stuck or discouraged, remember that you're not alone.
Everyone starts somewhere. And with consistent effort and the right strategies, you can achieve your goals.
So what's one small step you can take today to start speaking more fluently?
We encourage you to think about that.
And until next time, keep practicing and keep believing in yourself.
And remember, every time you speak English, you're one step closer to fluency.
We'll see you soon on Speak More Fluently.
Bye for now.